We've had some conversation already, throughout the session about careers, right? And just to comment, sort of echo this, but my belief that careers are not linear. It's not linear, as much as law school wants to make it seem that way. And so we are really, really lucky to have a panel now. I'm not gonna do introductions because you're gonna hear a lot about them and their career paths, and so it'll be redundant if I introduce everyone on this panel. But I think it's an opportunity for you all to learn different ways you can get into this work, and different ways the work, once you get into it, can evolve into something else. And so throughout this panel, jot down all the questions you have, from concrete questions to just kind of life planning questions. I would say it's a special treat also to have former fellows, Leda, who was a fellow last year, come back to lead this work on behalf of the National Association of Counsel for Children. And I also, we talked a little bit about the national organizations yesterday. But NACC is a big organization that does a lot of work with law students and practitioners, American Bar Association Center for Children's Law. There's a lot of incredible work. Rick Silverthorne's here from Casey Helmer's program. This is Christopher. Do a lot of just really good national work. And so it's really important for you all to know just who the players are out there, because based on your interests, you might want to get connected with them during law school and beyond. With that, thank you, Leda, for organizing this.
Thank you. All right. So as mentioned, my name is Leda. I am a fellow from last year, the 2022 cohort. I'm really, really excited to see you all here. I hear it was a very competitive application year, so it's really amazing that you all were able to make it for this training. I also work for the National Association of Counsel for Children. I'm their National Law School Student Organizer. So part of my job is I go from school to school and help organize panels like these. In addition to that, we really encourage students to open student chapters of NACC. That's something new that we've been starting. We currently have 3 chapters. I will go into that a little bit later just because I really want to dive into this. But I'm really excited. We have students here from so many different schools. I will allow you guys at the end. I really do want to hear what you guys are doing this summer and where you guys are going to school. So we'll allow maybe 5-10 minutes at the end to be able to go through all of that. In front of you, or I don't know if it's in front of you, but you were all given the bio sheets for all of our panelists here. So we're just going to dive right in. And usually I start by giving a brief overview of the child welfare system. Truly very, very brief. And then on top of that, depending on the state I'm in, I'll give a little state snapshot of what the system currently looks like there. Because you guys are from all over, I'm not going to do that. And additionally, you've already had 2 days to kind of dive into this work. So I'm really excited that you're already familiar. So we're just going to go ahead and down the line. I have our panelists introduce themselves with their name, their current role, if they have any other degrees or credentials, licenses, things like that. And what do you guys do now?
Sure. Hi. I've been with you guys for 2 days already, so you know, but I'm Katie Loris. I currently am a clinical teaching fellow in the Juvenile Justice Clinic here at Michigan Law School. So primarily currently representing teaching students and representing youth in delinquency matters. But my background and practice prior was in family defense. And you said degrees. Oh, I have a master's of science and teaching. And a JD, and I'm barred in Michigan, New York, and Massachusetts.
I am Linda McKee, and I am currently the co-director of Michigan Children's Law Center, and I'm the state coordinator for the state of Michigan for the NACC, which has been a lot of fun. This is my last term. This is probably the last thing that I'll be able to do as the state coordinator. And I graduated from the University of Michigan for undergrad, Wayne State University for law school. I'm a child welfare law specialist. I'm sure you guys have probably all heard about that. And what was the other part of the question? I'm practicing in Wayne County, which is the largest county in the state of Michigan, as an LGAL. So I represent kids in foster care, child welfare, and juvenile justice. I'm a former prosecutor, so I'm able to, and I used to represent parents. So I kind of have a little bit of experience doing everything, which makes the job that I have now so enjoyable, because I haven't just had one line of work in that area.
Brooke Silverthorne. I am currently with Casey Family Programs. I am a Senior Director in the Judicial National Engagement team, which means that I get to work with amazing people in every state across the country on reducing the need for foster care. I also have a varied degree. I worked at NACC for 5 years. I represented the Child Protection Agency in Georgia for 9 years. I represented kids in Colorado for a brief period of time. Haven't represented parents yet. And I say yet because who knows. But very happy to be here. I'm also CWLS.
My bio is so similar to Brooke's. I began my career in Georgia. I met Brooke almost on my first day. I currently work for Casey Family Programs as a senior director. I'm in a different division, but help support our organization's mission of safely reducing the need for foster care. I also teach a clinic at Emory University School of Law, where we partner with Fulton County Public Defender to do dependency appeals. And I have a law degree. I had a brief other graduate experience where I picked up a master's in math, which is bizarre. But now some of the people that were here earlier will understand why I'm so obsessed with the data. And I'm also a child welfare law specialist. I practice in Georgia and South Carolina.
Are you all familiar with CWLS? CWLS is what I explained.
Yeah, since I used to work there, I guess I got the short stick. So the National Association of Counsel for Children is the accrediting body for, yeah, the only accrediting body, yes, the only accrediting body for child welfare law specialist certification. And it is, for me, it was important for me to get my child welfare law specialist certification just because I feel like I owe it to the families that I serve in this role to be as, you know, at the top of my game, to learn as much as I possibly can, to know as much as I possibly can, and to be a lifelong learner. And the CWLS program requires that you take an exam. It's nothing like the bar exam. It's very short. I think it's only half a day, 60 multiple choice, 2 essays, no big deal. But you also have to have practiced, I think, for like three years. You have to have a certain number of CLEs within the child welfare field. And I'm missing, you have to have recommendations from, and actually for my recertification, like we've been each other's peer reviewer. So yeah, so I would encourage all of you, once you get into practice, if this is something that you want to look into, definitely do that. One of the things that I really like about the CWLS program is that it allows for a lot of opportunities to network with other folks around the country. And so I get to meet great people from all over. The National Association of Counsel for Children has an annual conference, and they have a CWLS mixer, and so yeah, it's a really great program, and happy to talk more about it some other time.
It's quite yet available in every state yet. That's something that we are working on. You all have a few years of some time anyways, so once you get to that point, if we're still not in your state, definitely reach out and we can make something happen.
I do want to put a plug in. I think it brings credibility to our field. It's a specialization that has to be recognized by your state bar. So there are these rigorous requirements. 60 multiple choice and 2 essays. Like I had some like trauma thinking back on that.
Sorry,
but it's fun.
Yeah.
Right. Like I think I did it in my mid-30s, and I learned a lot. Like going back and studying. But it's the area that we care so deeply about, and it wasn't available in my jurisdiction when I moved there, and I worked with NACC, and they did all the work, and I just got to take all the credit for like ushering it through the process. But I think it's a really important tool, and I hope more, and I try to encourage as many lawyers as possible that are committed to this field to pick up that credential.
And if I could just add one thing to that, there's a red book that we study in order to pass this exam. And Professor Stankerin is one of the authors of the Red Book. And even now, before you, even if you're not ready to take the exam, that Red Book is so valuable because you get so much information about the history of child welfare, all of the statutes that are relevant. It's updated every few years. I think you should get the Red Book.
I actually forgot to mention.
Do student members get it?
Well, these students, actually,
Okay.
you will all receive one,
Oh,
right?
you
If
got
the
it
program
already.
has not changed.
I don't think we gave them out this year.
Oh, well, okay, so students, there is a discount.
We'll edit that out in the.
There is a discount for students, and a lot of universities are even starting to use them as textbooks. It's really, really cool to, it's our 4th edition already. So to be able to continue to use it as a resource. Very cool. Okay, so we're maybe perhaps getting to the point of our law school career as students where we're really questioning, like, why are we here? What's our motivation? What's our purpose? So what brought you all to law school? And like, just why law? I mean, you have a master's in math, why law school?
Yeah, I think I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be I was studying math to maybe go into academia. I was in a graduate program, and I took a fellowship abroad because I was really wanting to like sort of shock my system. I hadn't really done much in terms of that, and ended up in a country that still had orphanages and did some volunteer work in those orphanages, and sort of romanticized the idea that I was gonna, come back, change my career, and do like international human rights or something like international children's law. And one of the folks that I was volunteering with said, when you go back and you're finishing up and preparing for law school, become a CASA and, volunteer CASA. And I had no idea what that was. I couldn't have told you what foster care was or any, dependency, anything like that. I came back, volunteered to become a CASA and realized that all those issues that I saw in Russia were happening in my backyard, and decided that I wanted to work in that space, and so went to law school and came out the other end and went to work in this field.
Anyone else want to chime in? What brought you to law school?
Well, I was teaching after I graduated from U of M. I taught school in Detroit Public Schools. And because I was a substitute, I got to mix it up with a whole bunch of different grades, right? And the middle school males that I was teaching couldn't read for the most part. And I was a sub, so I'm not committed to teaching them how to read, but it just kind of stuck with me. And I would go home at the end of the day and think, well, how are they ever going to make it? I'm teaching 8th grade. These kids are about to go to high school. Some of them have repeated 8th grade 2 or 3 times. How are they ever going to make it? And I was teaching one day, and I told the students, hey, whoever wants to stay after school with me to learn how to read can stay after school. So that became like a little reading club of about 4 young men who were going, they should have failed the 8th grade, but they needed to move on to high school because they were too old, 16 years old. And I learned from them that they were selling drugs. And the mentality, at least these 3 or 4, not everybody, but the mentality was, I don't really need an education because I'm gonna be a drug dealer. I'm gonna make all this money. And Young Boys Incorporated was really popular. They were making a lot of money. But I said, I gotta do something else. I need to, I wanna help these kids, and I'm not gonna be able to teach because I don't really like it. But but I gotta do something. And so I started law school shortly after that, 3 years after teaching, and I got a job as an intern. It was a paid internship with the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. And in the prosecutor's office at that time, there was cohesiveness. The defense and the prosecutor's office wanted the kids to make it. So there were programs, there was rehabilitation, that was the goal for the kids, not punishment. And it really worked for a time. That kind of changed, and I ended up leaving the prosecutor's office when the focus became punishment and became a defense attorney. And that kind of just spiraled into me working with Michigan Children's Law Center. Here I am.
Is this the type of work you always thought you would see yourself doing?
Not at all, no.
Can any of you say that?
Yeah.
This is what you've always wanted to do?
I mean, not always. Although, when I decided I was going to go to law school, and I was a little bit older when I decided that, my grandma said, "Oh, yeah, you always wanted to be a lawyer." And I was like, "Really? I don't remember ever saying that." But I think once I decided to go to law school, this was what I wanted to work with kids, and I thought I was going to be in the juvenile justice system. And that was sort of where I focused my time and energy when I was in law school. And I always, like, now, at the time, I didn't find this strange. Now that I have practiced for a number of years and worked in this field, I find it strange that I used to think, oh, I want to go into juvenile justice because the foster care side of things is way too emotional for me. Like, I was worried about my boundaries. I was worried about my ability to cope. And looking back, I think, I don't know why I thought there was such a big distinction in terms of, like, because the juvenile justice system is, equally as, emotionally taxing as the foster care and dependency system. But yeah, I think the thing that sparked my interest in wanting to work with kids and families in some way was reading the book, There Are No Children Here by Alex Kotlowitz. And it's an old book, but it wasn't a foster care book, but it was about these two kids who grew up in the projects in Chicago, south side of Chicago, and just about their life and their struggles and what they had to go through. And it just really spoke to me. And I thought, I need to figure out how I can help. So that was my story.
From Chicago, I didn't say that. I go to Loyola in Chicago as well, or just Rising 3L. So I do want to follow that thread though a little bit about having these boundaries. So how do you all both, maintain and respect your boundaries while doing this work? And just take care of yourself.
I'm headed to Florida Saturday. I travel. And I have to, gotta step away sometimes because it is very emotional work, but it's so rewarding that you don't want to leave it. But I have to take breaks. So that's what I do.
I think it's super important to understand what yourself, like to really have that self-awareness. I tell this story where at the beginning of my career, after graduating law school, I started representing DFACS, the Department of Family and Children's Services in Metro Atlanta County. And that was emotionally taxing. And I used running, after hard days of court, I would go run, even if it was July and still 90 degrees at 6 o'clock in Georgia. And that worked. When I moved to Colorado and I started, I took a very small handful of cases as a guardian ad litem, attorney guardian ad litem in Colorado when I worked for NACC. And I incorrectly thought, oh, I've been doing this for 10 years. This is not going to be a problem for me. And I tell you, the first time I was visiting my two young male clients and I went to the foster home and the foster mom was like, oh, they're in the room, go down the hall, second door on the left. And I walked in and the little 5-year-old boy came, before I could even really say anything, I had my whole spiel. I was all like, I've never done this before, but he ran up to me, he put his arms around my legs, started crying and said, you're gonna help me see my mommy again. When is that gonna happen? And I thought, holy shit. I did not emotionally prepare myself for this. And it took a lot of self-reflection and all kinds of stuff to be able to get through representing kids. And I just had this blind spot, I just thought I would be fine. And what I realized was that when I was representing the department, sure, I had some connection, some proximity to the families, but it was very much buffered by the social workers. and the children's attorneys. I remember leaving court on days and kids would be screaming, and the caseworker and the child's attorney would be, you know, trying to get the kid out to the car to take the child back to the foster home. And as the agency attorney, I'd be walking to my car, okay, see you guys later, have a good night. And thinking, oh, thank God I don't have to now, after that terrible like court day, also have to deal with the child. So I say all that to say, I think it's really important to pay attention. What I ended up realizing is, I don't know that I can represent kids. Like, I don't know that that's a space that is good for me or good for my child clients, just without a lot more like work. And so I think it's really important to know what you're capable of, what you're willing to do, and to really, you know, think about that.
And I think just building off what's been said, and more generally, like, one, set boundaries, right? And give yourself grace when you overstep those boundaries, and revisit those boundaries, right? What works for you in the first couple of years of your career may not work later on, right? So I think another thing Brooke said is know what helps you recharge, and don't sacrifice that, right? Like, we all know what helps us thrive in this world, and oftentimes those are some of the things that we let go of first when we tell ourselves there's something we must do, there's a deadline that I just have to work on. And so create the space and try to, you know, again, give yourself grace to step away. I think that the other thing that I heard that I would just sort of like generalize is, like, allow yourself to experience joy. Like, you cannot carry the injustices of the world on your shoulders 24/7. You can fight for them and you can be energized by doing that work, but allow yourselves to step away and experience the things that give you joy and give you happiness, and don't allow yourselves to feel guilt over that, because that's part of being here, is knowing that tension, right? Like, I'm drawn to this system, I'm drawn to fight for these injustices, but I'm not gonna let that, you know, ruin me or crush my soul, right? I'm still gonna allow myself to be happy and to experience things that, you know, bring you joy. So.
And I would just add, you have to find what brings you joy. You have to find how you both take a break and how you recharge, what energizes you. But it's also, it's not all on you. And so I would empower you and encourage you when you're out in your summer placements, when you're looking for jobs after graduation, ask questions about what's the community like in the offices you're working in. What does the office do specifically to help people with those aspects? Because those pieces are can be really invaluable.
Kind of my next question, talking about the work environment and different settings that you've all worked in. Brooke, I heard you say that you realize that you no longer can work with children in that capacity anymore. So in what capacity, because it's such a large field, just child law and child welfare law, where there's just so many different possibilities on what that work could look like. So thinking about your own work environments, particularly when we're in a time post-ish COVID, you know, some people are working remote still, some people are still doing Zoom court. So what does your current work environment look like, and what have you learned works best for you?
Sure. I mean, I like to be in person. Zoom court is a different thing, and there are pros and cons to it. For litigants, for judges, and for like the families that we're working with, there's pros and cons. But I know for me, I think we were saying this in the hallway, I loved to be able after court to walk into a colleague's office and just like debrief with them. And that was invaluable to me. And for that reason, I would never have wanted to, for example, be a solo practitioner. And so that work community was really important to me. Now I'm teaching, it's very different. But I do, in my co-faculty as well as with my students who are working more directly on the cases, have that ability to process verbally what has been going on. And that enables me to not need to bring that home as much. And also, so I don't want to bring that home. I want to create that boundary where I'm leaving that at work and going home to my family, but also the people in my home don't necessarily understand what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. And so having that built-in network of people that do understand, where I don't have to explain to them, what type of hearing I'm talking about in order to help them sort of commiserate with whatever just happened was really powerful and beneficial.
Well, at MCLC, or Wayne County in general, we are still operating on a remote basis, and it works to the extent that more of the litigants are able to attend court. And we work in a county, a court system that adjourns a lot of cases for whatever reason. An attorney isn't there, or a social worker isn't available, or a parent is sick, or something is happening, and everybody gets down there. Our clients miss school, somebody's missing work, and then they find out it's adjourned. So with the remote access, we have been able to, the court has been able to cut down on not just the number of adjournments, but they've increased the number, the ability of the litigants to get there, especially our clients, because our teen clients, MCLC has represent all the kids, juvenile justice, child welfare, but we have an emphasis on the older children, who are commonly known as the aging out population. And we like to have them in court. They should be there. They have a right to be there. And it's difficult to be there without transportation. Or if I have to go to school and make it down to court, or if I have to go to work and make it to court. So that has been phenomenal, having the remote hearings, but I do miss the community. Same thing with our office, at the end of especially a trying day, it's very helpful to be able to go into our what we call a lounge, it's really an office, and just kind of debrief and talk about what went right, what went wrong, talked about our cases all the time. We lost that. So we're very isolated now in our homes, and I think that can add to the stress of the work, because you don't have anybody to bounce this off of, and just like you said, your family, I can't lay what just happened in this case on my family. My husband's already like, oh my gosh, you do what you do, So I do miss the community, but I think we're about to start opening up now.
And just for some perspective, how large is your organization?
We have 12 attorneys.
So actually, I'm smaller.
Yeah, for me, I've actually worked a lot remotely. Just at NACC, I was remote for a lot of the time. We started out in an office in Colorado and then moved to remote. I work remotely now from Georgia, but KC offices are in Seattle, and we have folks in every state across the country. When I represented the department, the way that it was structured in Georgia was that we were independent contractors, so we were appointed by the state attorney general. And so not affiliated with like a government office or the way, like a prosecutor's office, in the way that some attorneys who represent the agency are. And so I think I just really got used to sort of being on my own. But I do miss the ability to sort of have that community. I know that when I am in situations, and my family tells me this too, like, oh, you went out to, you had a retreat and you went out and you were with all these people, or you went out to dinner with some colleagues and you come back and you're so energized. Whereas like normally you're just kind of like, so I think it really is important. I can say that I worked with some really amazing people. I've been really fortunate to do that. And pay attention when you're looking for jobs, and the summer when you're in environments, pay attention to what it is, like who you're drawn to, and just ask them a million questions. And like Yvette said, just be curious.
And I think I'll just reinforce the common thread here, which is find your people, right? Like you're in a room of them right now, and don't lose that thread, right? Like don't lose those connections. I love working in an office when I'm surrounded by like my people, and it energizes me, and I debrief and do all of those things that have been said. I haven't always had that, opportunity. I work remotely now. But I sort of try to embrace, the Zoom world we live in, and connect as much as I can, and in different ways with, people that I formally work with, people that I just informally know, and so I think finding your community and your people and clinging to those connections is really important.
Absolutely. So whether your people are fellow NACC students, because it is free to be a member of NACC as a student, or just even among the people in this room. We have a group chat for our cohort, and we're still actually, it's still very, I don't even know if you guys know, it's still very active. We're constantly sharing articles, papers we've written. Sometimes we're working on a case and just, bouncing ideas off of each other, or like, hey, how is this working in your guys' state? Like, what could we be doing better? We're like literally probably, at least once a month, something's being popped in there. So it's really a really great resource to be able to lean on all of the fellows. Okay, well, this is a very, both child law and child welfare law specifically tends to be very women heavy. It's often referred to as kitty law, which we all hate. So I'm not going to necessarily call on anyone or ask a question, but I'd really love you all to start to think about how we can both diversify the field in terms of lived experience, incorporating more men to this particular field, and then also, it's one thing to just get started here, but how do we keep this going throughout your careers? How do we keep folks interested in wanting to continue to do this work? It's obviously very hard. It's very taxing. Nobody seems to know what we're doing or what we're talking about. So really, as you go into your career, start to think about a couple of those things. The next question is for the ladies. Along that vein, we're going to continue talking about the work environment. So if you can describe perhaps some of the challenges you may have faced either as a woman or person of color in the professional workspace and how you've overcome these.
I can say in every job that I've had in this field have been in offices that were predominantly women. I don't think I've had a lot of challenges in that aspect. I think that along with other jobs that end up being predominantly women, people that do this work are underpaid. But you're all going into it knowing that, so.
Well, that's loaded. As a person of color, as a Black woman, I have faced, I wouldn't say blatant discrimination or racism. I think my challenge with it, which I know you're going to hear NACC so much, but the NACC has an emphasis right now on addressing the disparities within the child welfare system, because Black people and people of color make up more of cases than other races or white people. So with that being said, when I bring that up in court, I get a little bit of pushback because Michigan isn't there yet. We're not talking, this is not a conversation we have. We talk about it at NACC all the time. You'll hear, if you come to the conference, you're gonna hear about how the disparities are being addressed and how we can advocate with the social workers, with the attorneys, with the jurists, all of that, and get recharged, re-energized to come back to Michigan, and nobody knows what you're talking about. So you have to teach it. So I see a lot of that because Wayne County cases are made up of a lot of Black kids and a lot of Black families that have been broken up. It's just disheartening. The juvenile justice cases, I know I'm here for child welfare, but there's so much overlap. It is hard to distinguish between the two. It's mainly Black males, and detention is made up of mainly Black males, and we have to talk about that. It may be uncomfortable, but in court, that has to come up, that this is what we're seeing, and we can't just keep ignoring it. I've been doing this 30 years, and we just ignored the race issue. But in terms of racism toward me or prejudice toward me, I'm sure there has been some. I've been called a worker more times than I can count by people who have seen me for 25 years, and I'm still a social worker. They still ask me for a report. When I come to the courtroom, of course, we're remote, so that doesn't happen as much anymore. And but I have a colleague, I'm a co-director, and my colleague, the other co-director is a white woman, and she's treated the same way sometimes. They ask her for a report when she goes in, but she's young, she's a very young woman. So I'm sure there have been some examples here and there, but for the most part, I think since Wayne County is so diverse in practice, that I haven't really seen a lot of hatred, racism, or discrimination.
You actually brought up a good point that I want to kind of circle back to. in talking about your clients and just the demographics of your clients, in this work in particular. So perhaps maybe a different question along the same vein. Have you seen, and then what have you done to address any of, perhaps comments that have been made against your clients in regard to, you know, their race or, you know, one of those kids or whatever the saying is, because there's 1,000 things being said about it.
Have I seen it? Yes, I see that on a regular basis. I hear it on a regular basis, and I say something on a regular basis. There was a time earlier in my career where I might not have said anything because it's, you know, it's sort of generalized. It's not, the comments are not overtly racist, but they are racist. And I say something, and I'll ask that it be placed on the record what was just said about my client. And it's not as common as it used to be when I first started practicing. And I think that, you know, people are kind of waking up, or at least they know they can't just say stuff that's completely ignorant the way that they used to. And I'm talking about the lawyers, not even just witnesses or anything like that. So I just try to make a good record about it, just in case we have to do something later on down the line because of the way my client is being treated. I had an incident. There's a city, everybody's from outside of Michigan. But there's a city called Grosse Pointe. Don't know if anybody's ever heard of it. Very white city. It isn't as white as it used to be. But Grosse Pointe, at the time that I lived near Grosse Pointe on the east side of Detroit, was considered a racist city because they didn't really allow Black people to come over there. And what I mean by that, of course, they can't put up a sign saying no Black people allowed. But if Black males would come over, especially kids, teenagers, young adults, then the police were on them. You know, you did something wrong. Your windshield was cracked, or you were driving erratically. Something was wrong. So their court was made up. Their criminal court was made up mainly of Black people in a white city. And I hate to be so crass with white and Black, but that, you know, it just kind of is what it is. And I had a client there, and the prosecuting attorney said he was in this city after whatever time it was, and it was a stolen iPad that he was being accused of stealing an iPad. And the prosecuting attorney said he was in the city after whatever time it was, and everybody knows that he didn't have any business being in the city. And I just about blew a gasket. It has nothing to do with child welfare, but this is what we see. And I almost blew a gasket, and as soon as I'm pushing back on that and I'm trying to make a record, the judge made a record and said that he does not tolerate that type of comment. I should have filed a complaint. That's what I should have done, because he may have gone on and made those kind of comments somewhere else to other people because I didn't file a complaint. So I didn't do that, but we did have a pretty good record, but the police officers had that same type of attitude. And then the kids end up in the juvenile court system because of those attitudes. We don't have any business being in your city, and therefore we're getting charged with crimes to discourage us from coming into your city. So that's that. I mean, it's, in terms of what we've done, I'm just getting started. It's 30 years later, and I'm just getting started, and I'm so encouraged by this, by all of you, because I know you're not going to take any of that crap. You know, I know you're not. And I did, my generation did for probably a decade or two before we started saying something.
Yeah. So I won't ask the question, but again, start to think about some of the ways that we can start to hold our colleagues accountable in this work. Because like you said, it's the attorneys sometimes. It's not necessarily, or the judge or social worker. It's not like, you know, mom saying something about dad or vice versa. A lot of times it is the people that we're working with in this space. So I want to go back to our law journeys, our legal journeys, and talk a little bit about some of the roles that you guys have held before your current role, and how that prepared you for what you're doing now, and or if you took any, you know, maybe perhaps not a straight line to where you got to be today. I'd love to hear about that.
I'm happy to jump in. So I did not take a straight line to where I am today, and my course continues to zigzag. And I think what I've made sure with every turn is that that next step is the right step for that moment, and try to just be present in that role while I'm there, because what that has done is meant that every time I take another step, there's another layer of something that I'm bringing in a different perspective, and that adds value. And so I was an elementary school teacher, and then I went to law school. I then after law school represented parents and children in dependency cases in Boston. After that, I represented just parents in dependency cases in New York. And now I am teaching juvenile justice in Michigan. And yeah, I wouldn't change any of it, but also none of it was planned. I just tried to be sure that I was being true to myself in each step, and felt good about that step for that moment, and tried to take whatever I could from that experience.
And I'm not sure there are straight lines, right? Like, I think that's part of what I would take away, or would share in response to that question. And I'll just say one other thing, like when I moved from Georgia to South Carolina, I left a job I loved. I was anxious about that. I was completely happy, completely fulfilled. But I wanted to be with my wife. She lived in South Carolina. And so that move and the subsequent job I took had absolutely nothing to do with child welfare or a career goal. It was, this is what I need, and I want to be with this person, and I'm going to figure it out when I get there. And so I think sometimes, like, taking a deep breath and just saying and trusting that you will find a way to do the work you want to do where life takes you, is what I would say. And so I love the opportunities I've had, and I've always been really fortunate to have tremendous supervisors and that have supported me. But I would have never moved to South Carolina, like if my wife hadn't got a job at USC. And so, but that's where life took me, and I found my niche there. So, I think just not being wedded to a particular narrative or office is also important, and just and trusting that you'll follow your arc of where you want to be.
And I always thought that I would retire from the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, and once things kind of went south, it was a little devastating that wasn't going to be what I did for the rest of my life. So I would say no, that life does zigzag, but I know that my purpose is to help children. So I think if you know what you're meant to do, you can do it anywhere, and you can do it from various positions in your life. You can do it. I mean, if you go corporate, you might become a corporate attorney, but you can still volunteer to be a CASA, or you can still take on some child welfare cases. I would prefer that all of you specialize in child welfare and make that your primary career path, but everybody's not going to do that. And then if things don't work out, there's something else there. So don't let it devastate you. I was devastated. Thank God I had really supportive parents who were able to kind of talk me off the ledge, like, okay, you're going to be okay. You're going to work through this. And hopefully you have somebody who is in your corner who can support you emotionally like that. Even if you don't have somebody, just know it's never the end of the world if things don't work out the way that you plan, because law school is so intense, and you guys have already gotten this far. And when you graduate, and if you don't get the offer that you want, don't let it devastate you. That just means you weren't meant to be there. You're meant to be in child welfare. I'm just letting you know that now, okay? In some capacity.
I super zigzag. I don't even know what it'd be like to have a plan and then execute it. I never wanted to be in dependency. I was going to be in juvenile justice, and then that didn't work out. And I never wanted to represent the government. I wanted to be a defender, and then I find myself representing the government. And I thought I wanted to do policy, and then I found myself in the courtroom and ended up loving it. And there's something that, once for me anyway, once I was in the courtroom, it was hard to get away because there was just something that got into my blood, I guess, But I didn't know that about myself until I tried it, right? And then I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like my theme today has been my process of self-discovery. I left child welfare after a period of time, and I went to work at a medical legal partnership at a law school, and was doing really great work representing kids who had health harming legal needs, and doing really great work to remedy their housing conditions so that they didn't end up in the foster care system, and they didn't end up continually going to the emergency department, helping them to secure benefits. But there was that nagging part of me that really still missed child welfare. And this was adjacent to it, but it wasn't it. And so I would say, try things out. And if they don't work out, you can always go back. I had built enough connections within the child welfare field. I'd done various things, made great connections, so that when I sat there and said, look, I really want to move back into child welfare, I could reach out to people, let them know, hey, I'm looking, I want to come back into the field. And, that was invaluable. And once I got back, it was kind of like riding a bike. And sure, there are things that I had to brush up on, and the field evolves. And so just learning what's happening today, because it was, maybe 3 years I was out, but I would say, always be flexible, trust your path, as Christopher said, and never be afraid that you can't go back, right? Because you can.
Honor wisdom, that's our last question. We do have a few more minutes. I have a couple more questions, but at this time, if you guys are starting to have questions come to mind, you can start writing them down so you won't forget. We'll definitely give you all an opportunity for some Q&A. And just quickly, because I'm curious, how many of you just finished your 1L year? You have 2L year, you just finished, mostly. Any of you just graduated? Congratulations. Awesome. So you guys can ignore this next part. But I'm curious, what are some of the things that you participated in during your legal education that prepared you for your job now? Like, what if these students are interested in doing child welfare law or juvenile justice, what are some of the things they could be doing now?
I mean, like the two things that I've said to this group that were most important to me were my summer experiences. So my law school didn't have the clinics that were focused on this area of law, the courses that were focused on this area. So I participated in Emory's summer child advocacy program. And then my second year participated in the Bergstrom fellowship, and the community, the education, like the training, the connections I made, just, it really reaffirmed my commitment to this area, although I don't think it was ever really wavering, but just brought me to a place where, again, like I found my people, and it sort of filled my cup and helped me develop some of those connections. When I graduated law school, I had 2 offers after applying to a lot more than 2 positions, and they were my 2 summer internships. And so those were the places that I had developed, my connections and reached back out to, and ultimately went to Georgia. But so I think that's, part of it was making sure that my activities, an externship or clinic or whatever you have, were in the area that I wanted to be.
I would agree with that. I think that everybody should have an externship in child welfare. In Michigan Children's Law Center, we have at least 2 externs a year. And we actually put them into practice. We train them a little bit, because I didn't receive any training, so I don't want anybody to just jump in a courtroom and have to figure stuff out. These clinics are really great. We didn't have that when I was in law school, but I did have the internship at the prosecutor's office, which was year round, and I had to work. It's good. I always say it's a paid internship because I had a little boy. I had to support my little boy. So that experience was invaluable, because I was an actual prosecutor, although I was a student, and I worked for 3 years as a prosecutor, and half the time the defense didn't even know I was a student. So I think that if you can connect with a law office or a governmental entity and work there as an extern or as a job, that'll be very, very beneficial to you.
I knew going to law school that I wanted to work with families in some way, whether that was juvenile justice or dependency work. And so I sought that out in whatever way I could from day one. I went to Penn. They have something called the Custody and Support Assistance Clinic. And so I managed a caseload of 20 clients as a 1L. That was different work. That was custody and support and protection from abuse orders. But it was, I had been working for several years before law school, and it was really important to me to be reminded, at least on a weekly basis, the people that I was there for. And so to get to work directly with clients was really important for me. And I did that through all 3 years of law school. I also we had the interdisciplinary child advocacy clinic that's run by Kara Fink. And I did that for 3 semesters, which was all the semesters that I was eligible to do it for. And my summer internships were really important. I did those in New York and Massachusetts. And I did an externship at the Child Advocacy Unit at the Defenders Association in Philadelphia. So I was really lucky that I knew what I wanted to do, or at least had some sense going into law school. So I was able to choose a law school that would afford me some opportunities. And then I sought out as much client contact and as much experience as I could. And that was really valuable in helping me decide all of the decision points that I've made since then. Looking back on those experiences and saying, oh, I really liked this part of that, so maybe this would work, or I didn't like this part of that, so this won't work.
Typical things. I went to a law school that didn't have a very big child dependency or juvenile justice program. And so I sort of had to find it on my own. And I went across town to Emory and said, hey, can I join you guys? And so I had to convince my school to let me do an externship and participate in Emory's programming for credit at my school, which they did. But you guys are connected to Bergstrom now, right? I mean, that's so valuable. You're connected to each other. You're connected to University of Michigan. You have so many resources and folks and experts at your disposal. I would say use them. I think I was kind of annoying as a law student, because anybody who was in child welfare, juvenile justice, whatever it was, I just wanted to follow them around. And what I realized is, one, attorneys really like to talk about themselves, so take advantage of that. But also, people in this field are very generous with their time. And that was, just so helpful for me. I used to get really nervous about, I want to ask that person to copy, but why would they go with me? But just, there's so much generosity in this field that you all are really poised to be able to take advantage of that. And there's national organizations now that are much more robust than back in the day when we were in law school. And NACC has is building a really great law school program. What are we calling it now?
It's stacked, guys. No. I'm going to chime in because this is such an interdisciplinary field, so many different opportunities to collaborate with so many different people in different fields, just to inform your practice and what you're doing for your cases. Loyola is actually they have a child welfare track, I guess you could say. So I was very fortunate in that we have a clinic, we have our child advocacy class. I was able to take the child welfare focused one, which was amazing. But I recognize that that's not at every school. So really thinking about the classes that you're taking in terms of things that you're interested in. Last semester, I took a sex trafficking class that I thought would really be informative of my practice as a child welfare attorney. And I'm not there yet, but I still hold that belief. I think there's a lot of overlap between sex trafficking and the child welfare system. Similarly, I took a domestic violence class. That's something you might see pretty often if you continue this work. I also did, my school has an abolition and movement lawyering class, which was just phenomenal. Like that's just, but I understand that's like very niche. So really taking advantage of like, perhaps your school doesn't have it, but someone else's does, and how can you get into it? And not for nothing, but how do you get credit for it as well? And if you can't, then maybe you just audit the class anyways, because it's something that you know will inform your practice and things that you're definitely interested in. So my final question, and then we'll turn it over to the students. What are any words of wisdom that you want to leave with students? Any advice? I mean, you said a few things already, so if you just want to reiterate that with a bit of a punch, that's totally fine. But what are we leaving students here today with?
I think this is probably just reiterating, but take everything one step at a time and just trust that if you stay true to what's important to you, that you'll keep going down a path that's going to be meaningful to you.
I like that word grace that you used earlier. I think that you should give yourself grace and understand that everything is not going to work out perfectly, and that's okay. And always think about the children. All of us have had some interaction with a youth or a young adult or older adult who has a lived experience, and we may just not even know it. Years ago, I started a program in my church to encourage the church to help young people who had aged out of foster care, and people who I had been in church with for decades approached me and said they were in foster care. And they were so glad I was doing this because nobody helped them, or it was a really rough experience. I never would have known that. So I think that my takeaway number 20 is to always remember that there are those among you who have this lived experience, and no matter what it is that you end up going into, there's a way to help them.
I often use the analogy, this is going to sound silly, but of viewing your career as sort of trying on clothes, right? You keep trying them on, right? Until you find something that fits, that looks good, that you feel comfortable in. Take the opportunity to say, oh, that looks really great on that person. Like, I love, that seems like an amazing job. Let me talk to that person. Let me find out about what they do on a daily basis. Let me ask if I can shadow them. And then, it may not be something that would work for you. And so just keep trying it on, continuing to stay open, meeting people, making connections. And I am not leaving you at this, but I want to remind you of what Vivek said, which is be curious, right? Not just in your cases, but also with yourself. What did I like about that job this summer? What really does get me up in the morning? What things do I like to do? What things am I doing that I realize, I'm sitting here writing this brief and I'm actually smiling. So pay attention to those things in your life.
I think in addition to, what we've all said throughout, the one thing I would add is find a good listener in your life and don't hold it in, right? So hopefully that good listener is your supervisor, and if not your supervisor, your colleague, but don't let that be the end of it, right? At some point you may just have to pay somebody to listen, right? We do that sometimes. Find a good listener and don't hold it in, right? So you'll be crushed by the weight if you do, and sometimes we just have to say things out loud. I call Vivek all the time. He could probably not get a word in edgewise because I'm just dumping on him, right? But he's a good listener, right? So find a good listener and make sure you're processing things out loud.
We give our wonderful panelists. Well, thank you all. I do want to allow some time for questions, and I know we're pushing up on lunch, but I also want you guys to know that you're in the room with amazing people. So what we're going to do is just go really, really fast around. I'm sure you've introduced yourself 1,000 times already this week, but if you could just do it once more with just your name, what school you go to, And if you've already accepted a summer position, and then after the fact, I believe you'll be dismissed for lunch. If you want to come up and ask questions individually, I'm going to volunteer all these folks. They'll stick around and answer any questions that you have. Really quickly, I have to give my NACC plug. So we are doing student chapters. You can sign up. If you do sign up for a student chapter, we have a chapter guide online. It's very easy to find. And you can also email me and I'm happy to share it with you. If you do start a student chapter, we will send your chapter a copy of our red book for free. That is for a limited time only. Come talk to me, we'll make it happen. We will have our conference this year in August. You all, I believe, still get a stipend too.
Yeah.
Great, awesome. So come to Minneapolis this summer and see, I'll be there. Brooke will be there, I think. Linda will also be there.
Yes.
Great, wonderful. All your favorite people already. You should be there. So I'm just gonna put that plug out there. It's a great opportunity to hear from so many experts in so many different parts of the country. This year is our inaugural career fair. So that will be the day before the conference begins. It will be free to attend. Well, doesn't matter anyways because you guys will have your stipends. But the career fair, if you have other students you want to share this with, the career fair will be free to attend. The conference, we will have a student rate. So we'll have, if you are looking for a more permanent position, other internships, externship opportunities, anything like that, you can apply. You just fill out the application. And then when we get a little bit closer to the date, we'll share other organizations that will be there and firms and things like that you guys might be interested in connecting with. In addition to that, at our conference, we do present 4 awards. And one of those awards, last year was our first year doing this, we do present an award to a student who is doing anything related to child welfare work that is worthy of being highlighted, which would be all of you, especially with your positions this summer. So you can nominate yourself, you can nominate a friend, you can have a friend nominate you if you don't want to nominate yourself. I don't see why you wouldn't, but up to you. So I look forward to seeing those applications as well. All right.